to Sugar Coated. I'm your host, Adrienne Garland, the CEO and founder of She Leads Media. For far too long, women have been conditioned to sugarcoat their words, their actions, and the way they show up in the world, and to conform to certain cultural norms and ideals. This is inherently designed to keep those who are outside of the norm from gaining power, prestige, wealth, and influence, preventing more women from being recognized and respected as the powerful leaders that we truly are. Join me each week as we dive into raw conversations with remarkable, uncompromising, and inspirational women that will encourage you to strip away your sugarcoating and move boldly in the direction of your magnificent dreams. Well, I just finished my incredible conversation with Wendy Cai-Lee, the CEO of Piermont Bank. And I'm super excited to share this conversation with you because Wendy talks about finances for women. And this is a very important topic. Women must get comfortable with talking about money and finances and advocating for what it is that we need, especially when women have businesses. So many women that I know and that I've spoken to and that are clients of mine have financed their business with credit cards. And what ends up happening is their credit scores get affected. If you miss a payment or if you're late on a payment, it reduces your credit score, which then prevents you from being eligible to get a loan. Or if you do get a loan, you get a worse interest rate, or you get, you're not able to borrow as much. There's a whole host of penalties, if you will, that are associated with a lower credit score. And when women don't have access to financing, what do? We do what we have access to, and we use things that we have access to, like our credit cards. But in this conversation, you'll hear from Wendy how she advocates going to a bank and having a discussion on where you are with what your financing needs are and what you need in order to grow your business with stage that you're in. I'm so excited to be able to share this conversation with you that I had with Wendy, because she talks about keeping your head down, working hard, and having the end goal in mind. And I think that in today's climate that we can get distracted with some things, but we need to focus on what the end goal is. And somebody like Wendy is a huge inspiration to me because she is now the CEO of a bank. And I believe that she is the only woman CEO of a bank in the United States, which is a sad state of affairs that there's only one woman, but hopefully things will change. So please listen in to this beautiful conversation that I have with my new friend, Wendy. And, please check out Piermont Bank. This isn't any type of an endorsement for them. I just think that it is a very forward-thinking bank that is committed to women entrepreneurs and women leaders. And we all know that women will play a much greater part in our world and in economies in the coming weeks, months, years, and decades from now. So please listen in to my beautiful conversation with Wendy Cai-Lee, CEO of Piermont Bank. Hi, everybody. This is Adrienne Garland, and welcome to Sugar Coated, a podcast where we discuss anything and everything without sugarcoating what we're talking about. So I am absolutely thrilled to be talking to my guest today. Her name is Wendy Cai-Lee, and she's the CEO of Piermont Bank. And I just love Piermont Bank, even though I don't bank there, and I'm going to say yet. When you sort of research Piermont Bank and you see how they talk about themselves, they say they're women-focused, entrepreneur-led, and technology-fortified. Just yes, heck yes to this bank. It is truly women-founded. It's women-led. There is a board of directors that are made up of a majority of women. And it's a new bank that was established quite recently. So you can see why I'm thrilled to be talking to the CEO of Piermont Bank. Welcome, everybody, and say hi, Wendy.
Hello. So it's great, Adrienne. Thank you so much for having me here. It is really great to be able to share my journey as as the CEO. Also, more importantly, building a bank that's really the only bank in the U.S. out of the 5,000 some banks that's has a female CEO, female board chair, and a female majority board. So obviously, we have a keen interest in supporting women-owned, women-led female entrepreneurs, especially during a time where we are all facing obviously not just a health crisis, but a financial crisis. So hopefully, through platforms like this, I'll be able to share more with more people in terms of how, what are the resources out there in helping female-led companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the most important things is sort of women and finance, and especially women who start businesses. There are so many statistics and research out there about how women leverage credit cards in order to, finance their business. And what ends up happening is their credit scores get hurt because of that, and they are less likely to be given loans. It just creates this whole entire cycle, and it's unfortunate. I'm really curious how Piermont Bank sort of came to be, and then how you came to be part of Piermont Bank. So maybe you could just give us a little bit of background on the bank, and then tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. So Piermont Bank is actually quite simple. So Piermont Bank was designed and launched with the sole focus in supporting small and mid-sized companies. And what we meant by that is, companies that needs loans between $1 million to 10 million. We also have been supporting small business through a lot of the SBA sponsor programs as well. So the idea is that, after 26 years of being in banking and seeing just the pinpoints, both from the client side, meaning banking clients, as well as internally in how banks are run and operated, I just thought that there's got to be a much more efficient and more practical way to provide banking solutions and products to small business owners. So that was really it. And I thought it was the perfect timing because with all the financial technologies that have been developed and proven and has been put into the marketplace in the last decade, right, since the 2008 financial crisis, it really is time to have a bank that truly can bridge between a fintech and the traditional bank, where we can do things much faster, right? We can, for example, at Piermont, we do our loan decisioning in 3 days versus 3 weeks at a traditional bank. So it is just about building a much more practical, efficient platform for small to mid-sized companies. So that's the entire premise for Piermont Bank. Piermont, as an idea, was conceived by me and back in 2017, and it took some time to put the capital deck together as well as to get through the chartering process. So we are the first and the only fully chartered commercial bank since the financial crisis for the state of New York.
Amazing. So many firsts, and I mean, I just love that you saw that need in the marketplace because it's clearly there, and you did what it took in order to get the charter and raise the funds in order to launch this bank.
Right.
I'm so happy to be talking to you and helping you to spread the word that Piermont is a resource for women entrepreneurs. Many women entrepreneurs that start their business don't necessarily look to get loans that are in the $1 million mark. But I also do know that it's really important to establish a relationship with the bank because hopefully at some point down the road, you will need that greater level of financing. So how can people who, might not be in that category of, I need $1 million, how can they start to establish a relationship with Piermont?
Right. So that's a great point, Adrienne, that not everybody starts out with the need nor qualify, right, for a seven-figure loan. With that said, it is so important that as an entrepreneur, you start out and your business from day one by finding a bank, right? It doesn't have to be Piermont, finding a bank who is willing to listen and understand your story, your needs. So even at traditional banks that you may not qualify for their loan, but they have the ability, right? At Piermont, for example, we will connect early stage entrepreneurs to CDFIs, to early stage financing platforms that have the support of the government, right? So the CDFIs, like a LIFT fund, for example, LIFT, LIFT fund, which is also started and chaired and run by a woman, and they do loans that's $50,000, $25,000, and find a bank that can help you, educate you, right, and guide you through that process. Is when do you need what, right? Yeah. So after these government supported CDFI funds, then there's the SBA program. Within the SBA program, the Small Business Administration, you have different types of SBA program with guarantees that, again, is to bridge you to a point where you can be independent enough and mature enough, I should say, that where you go to the bank for their senior lending, right? We call it senior lending. So there are just all these resources that, frankly, even if the bank doesn't offer directly, you need to find a bank who's willing to get you there, right? Sort of refer you to the right place. And so that, because whether you start out with a CDFI or SBA fund or any other type of lending, you still need a banking partner, right, that can manage your cash. Because it's not just opening a checking account. It's finding that bank who can help minimize the fees that you end up having to pay just on the deposit side of the equation. So I think that is why it's so important to find, I keep saying, right size your bank partner. Find a bank who's willing to and who understands your pain points.
Yeah. I think that because there's been so much attention on venture capital financing and even, angel investing, crowdfunding, all of that, I think so many people don't even consider a bank, like a traditional bank. And so I'm loving that there's this message here that, when I hear so many people and even people that I work with that some of my smaller clients that are looking for funding, so many women look to venture capital financing because this is something that we hear a lot about. We read a lot in the newspaper. There's, these unicorn companies that have gone out and they do their pitch decks and they look to venture capitalists for their initial financing. And it's funny that banks are not part of this conversation of like options. You hear advice about getting loans, but there's almost a resistance to getting a loan because, you have to pay loans back. But there are many other disadvantages to going down the venture capital finance route as well. So what would you say to someone, and I understand that every case is different, but what would you say to, a female entrepreneur that is looking to get some financing in order to get her business started. And she's thinking, well, I need to put together, a business plan and then start shopping it around to venture capitalists. Do you think that is, across the board, the right approach, or what type of advice would you potentially give?
Yeah, so that's also a great point and question as well in terms of when to get what type of financing.
Yeah.
It really comes down to cost, right? Because loans seem to it's more expensive, but it's actually cheaper than equity, meaning cheaper than taking money from venture capitalists and private equity, because equity is the most expensive financing. Yes. Because you're giving away your ownership.
Yes.
Loans, whether it's 4%, 6%, 12%, right? That there is, once you repay, when you get to a point you have the ability to repay, then you get to maintain all the upside of your business. Now, again, that's a balance, because at different juncture of your business, it's all, in my view, it's always a combination of different financing, right? So when you're starting out, of course, no banks or no platforms are willing to lend you money. So you want to start out with angel investors, right? And then you grow to the point where you bring in your round Series A or Series B, you involve VCs, right? The more institutional money. At the same time, you should never forget that how can I substitute, right, the equity with some debt, right? So it's not one or the other. In my view, like I said, it's always good to have a combination of financing in place.
Do you guys have resources for people so that they can do some research around this? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's really a combination. It's really understanding that there is a cost to equity that goes beyond the numbers, because even with, you're inviting people and their opinions into your business, and there's the potential that you can lose control. With a loan, the only thing that you're sort of on the line for is paying the money back. So no one's at a bank. I mean, I'm sure that you'll get advice and, help, but your banker is not going to tell you to change your business model. And if you don't, then they're pulling their money.
That's correct. And, in an ideal situation is that you have a banker who are giving you advice, not in terms of the need to how to change your business model, but helping you marry financing needs that's reflective of your business model, right? That would be a good banker, because, it's not just about, like I said, opening a checking account or giving you that $50,000. It's when to give you what. So here, like at Piermont, we also do not overextend credit to people. So we have business that can, if they want to borrow, frankly, 20 million, they have the capacity to do so. But we always tell them, you don't need it. You don't need it, then don't incur the cost of paying unused fees on these loans. So finding that bank partner that who, again, I go back to my first point, is that really somebody who's willing to spend the 30 minutes, the 60 minutes to understand your story.
Yeah. How do you handle this issue that, perhaps an entrepreneur will come to you and they'll say, look, I started my business. I financed it initially with some credit cards. I made some, I missed a couple of payments, but, I really need that $50,000 loan in order to buy the equipment to take my business to the next level. You have the traditional things, that you look at for that business, and you see, ooh, that business owner, woman business owner, her credit is bad. Now that's because maybe she wasn't able to get a loan, or she didn't understand. And so that's why she used her credit card. So she got herself into this situation, which I have heard this story, time and time again. So then what ends up happening is then her credit isn't great, and it's even more difficult to, find a loan, a traditional loan. Do you, as a, sort of a women-focused bank, do you take those factors into consideration?
Yeah. So, credit score obviously is important, right? Because we are a regulated entity. So even if you have a bank or bankers at a bank who's willing to be more flexible, at the end of the day, we have to adhere to certain examination requirement, right? So why do you make certain exception? When do you make exception? So we have to actually address those. So to more, I think practically, Adrienne, address your question, is that in cases like that, my advice would be to focus on essentially paying off those credit card debt, or that at least make those debt current, meaning not so that you improve your credit score, because that is really important, right? You can have the debt, but you don't need to have bad credit score.
Yeah.
That's two different things.
And do people have to be embarrassed? Like, because this is the other thing. It's like there is a lot of embarrassment around money, around credit scores. Maybe I'm not going to want to walk into Piermont Bank and say like, "Oh, my credit sucks. Can you help me?" What would you say to, somebody? Would you still encourage them to come in? And I mean, look, money is money. It's not a reflection on you as a human being, as an individual.
Yeah. So I would encourage them that don't be shy to have those conversations, right? And the conversation should be, okay, if I fix my credit score, right?
Yep.
When can I talk to you?
Yeah.
When will you be willing to talk to me?
Yeah.
Right? Have those understanding, right? So the bank should, in my view, a good banker should say, okay, if you get your credit score back to X, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and if your revenue meets this mark, that's when we can talk, right? That's the conversation you should have. Now, here, let's assume that, okay, what's been done is already done, right? That was your question, Adrienne, right?
Exactly.
You don't really have the $50,000 cash to pay off the outstanding debt to fix your credit. Okay, let's just assume the worst case scenario.
Yeah, good.
And to your point earlier, you actually also need another $20,000 to buy the equipment. Otherwise, your business will be further hindered, right, from a growth standpoint.
Yep.
So now what do? That's when you go for equity debt. That's when you try to raise some money from friends and family or from angel investors, because that's unfortunately when you need to give up part of your business in exchange so that you get yourself out of a sort of a no-win situation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you come up with some new product line and make some revenue and pay off that damn credit card.
Right.
Yeah.
And often it takes money to make money, right?
Does.
That's usually the reality.
Yeah.
So how do you make money when you don't have the money to create either the product or even to pay your vendor to create the actual product for you?
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I would advocate, that's when equity investment should kick in.
So Wendy, I mean, I have a million questions for you. So I guess just focusing on the bank still, because I want to go back to you too, because I'm so interested in you as a person. But does the bank also have sort of some of these resources? This is going to be a two-part question. Like, does the bank have resources that people can go and explore and research and everything? And then if somebody wanted to, get in touch with the bank and have these conversations, how exactly do they do that? Like, do they pick up the phone? Do they walk in? Like, what do they do?
Right. So let me answer your second question first. That's the easier one, is that Piermont at least is very digital. So you can get a hold of somebody at Piermont via our website. And we, as a bank, we guarantee response within 24 hours. So it's not like it goes into a black hole and you hope for the best that somebody will call you back. I can't speak for other banks in terms of their turnaround. So for banks that have branch locations, in persons, I say you just walk in there. You just say, hey, I need to make an appointment, right?
Right.
But for banks like you have a lot of new banks now, really focus on the digital route, right? So reach out to them. So that's the easier question of the two.
Mm-hmm.
For your first question in terms of resources, again, speaking for Piermont, is that if you reach out to us, we will direct you to resources where they can help, like they can answer your question. Depends on the stage of your business and depends on your need, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a Rolodex of, I won't say partners, but partners as well as networks where we think that can be most helpful to you based on your situation.
So I just think that it is so important for women to be able to speak the language of finance and to not be afraid to talk about money, to not be afraid to ask questions, to sort of not feel embarrassed. How did you get into this whole banking finance world? Because it's not a traditional path for women, unfortunately.
Well, that's literally my career from day one, meaning as far back as a freshman in college. So I'm an economics finance major. I was lucky enough to get an internship with a bank at a commercial bank, and then I was able to receive multiple offers from Wall Street firms. This is back in the early mid-90s. So it's been my fortunate, I guess for me, fortunate, been the access was there from day one, right? And fortunately for me, it turns out to be something that I actually very much enjoy doing, right? Think about it, how often where we start out our career or our academic career in something, and then later on to find out that, we really have no passion for it, right? So for me, I actually really love what I do. And I joke about that, the fact that this is all I know how to do. So now that said, the path was never always smooth. What do I mean by that? Especially in a frontline, we call it a frontline production role, sales role. In the early days, you do see fewer women, right? So it is literally about staying in the game. So my class at my first bank was 25 people. Half from undergraduate, half from MBA schools. So they designed that on purpose. And by the end of the first year, half of us were gone. Yeah. By the end of the second year, another half were gone. So it was really about, knowing what sort of makes you happy in the morning. For me is I wake up in the morning thinking about, okay, today I got to resolve that issue, right? In a very boring way, I fundamentally enjoy what I do.
Did you always have an eye toward like women in finance, or is that something that you came to later?
Because it was my academic training, so it became early on a path of least resistance, so to speak, right? That's your academic training. But it was also highly advocated by my parents, who I obviously respect their opinion a great deal. And also a little bit by accident too, meaning that even though I had internship with the bank, I had the academic training, I actually envisioned myself to be in foreign service. So I tried very hard trying to get into the State Department, then CIA, then FBI, basically
me too.
Try all those venues. I passed the written exams, but never made it, through all the rounds for different reasons. And it got to a point where, I basically was told that, listen, out of the 4 Wall Street offers, just take one and move on.
Right. That's so funny. I share with you my major in undergrad was economics. And one of the first things that I did when I graduated from college is I went and I sat for the exams for the CIA, for the FBI. Oh my gosh, hearing you say that is just awesome. I mean, I wanted to be some type of investigator and, finding crime in the monetary system and everything like that. And that sort of didn't work out for me. I had a different path in finance because I did start out in finance. I was one of these, young women that have an ability for math. And I always loved math. I always did very well in math. And, it's why I did well in economics and why I went into finance. And I actually started my career out in equity research and investment banking. And I went back to get my MBA at NYU Stern in finance. I was so happy that, I was accepted into that program and really, really, hell-bent on being, a woman leader in the finance industry. And I worked at a company before I quit. I worked at a company called GKN Securities, and they were doing some things that I saw and they ended up getting fined for. And I really I really soured on the whole, finance industry. And I just thought that it was very chauvinistic. And I ended up having, not a great experience. And so I didn't stay in the game, and I switched, and I went through marketing. And I always am very proud that I have financial acumen. I'm very comfortable with numbers, and that's served me really, really well in marketing. But I definitely did not have a good experience in the finance world. So when I talk to women that have, gotten far like you, and I mean, you're a CEO of a bank, that is incredible. And I want to see more women get to those positions. It's something that I aspired to do. And I won't say that I couldn't hack it, but I didn't want to be in it anymore because I just thought that the odds were so stacked against a woman. And I never had that experience going through college or high school. I never felt like, oh, the men are trying to hold me down. It wasn't until I got out into the work world that I saw all this like crap that went on. And, I'm just wondering, I mean, you stayed in the game, which is amazing. Did you experience any type of, anything? Did you experience anything that was sort of negative and you were able to either correct it or, push past it? I would just love to kind of hear that. And I think my audience would love to hear that too, to really just make it real. Like this was not smooth sailing, I assume, for you.
No. I'd be totally lying, frankly. It's not even practical for somebody to stand here and say it was smooth sailing. No, not at all. Have I seen things that I didn't like, I didn't agree with? Absolutely. To me, I think it was more important that once I really got into banking and realized that I actually like what I was doing and what I am obviously currently still doing, is that here, you get to the table first, then you can make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So for me, maybe it was the naive part of me. So I did sort of do this whole, I'm going to keep my head down and I'm going to keep focusing on what I want to accomplish and what I want to learn and what I want to take away from this job. And I looked at every position I had was an opportunity to get me not so much climb the ladder, but get me the skill set so that I can actually one day get to the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So, it was really that of also understanding that, hey, at the end of the day, you cannot change things that's outside of your control, meaning that you need to, I always told myself that focus on what you can control, focus on what you can influence, right?
Yeah.
And then bit by bit, hopefully one day that ability that to influence more continues to increase. So that was really it. And then also always hoping and envisioning that things will get better, especially as a minority, meaning from being a woman, right, as a minority. So yeah, the naiveness helped, to be very honest.
No, I think that that's great. And I totally respect that and understand that too. And it makes me wonder, did you have anybody that you could talk to? Like, did you have a mentor or were your parents really encouraging?
So one of the big thing, and I'm sure your audience have heard this before, I always emphasize there's a big difference between a mentor and a champion.
Yeah.
Yes, you need champion. Because mentor is great, right? To talk to bounce ideas from, but you need champion that will take you along with them.
Yeah.
And that is so much more critical in the world of finance, in my view. I think it's important in every industry, but in a very male-dominated industry, you really do need that champion to take you along with them. And from my experience, it has always been the man. And it's been, unfortunately, the women who basically said, no, a lot of them, they view that since there's only one, they think that there's only one seat at the table for a woman and they want to make sure that they keep everybody else out versus, hey, we should bring more women to the table so that we don't have this issue of fighting for that one seat.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I had that
Luckily for
experience
me,
too. Yeah.
yeah, it's been the man that's been my champion.
That's amazing. That's so good. And I think that that's such a good message too, that, so many times, and it's so hard. It's, as a champion for women, as, a feminist, I always want to make sure that I'm never bringing men down, because I don't think that all men are, out to, hold women back or whatever. I don't, because there have been incredible men that have really helped me along in my career and just personally. And I am so thankful and grateful for them. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is these sweeping statements come out like, oh, all men,
Yeah.
all men in finance, or, like boiler room or something like that. And yeah, like I've seen that. But at the same time, there's also been really good men that have given incredible advice and have, really helped. And so I think we just need to acknowledge that. And I agree with you. And I've experienced it too. In the finance world, it was much more so the good men that acted more like advocates and mentors than some of the women. And that was also something that, you're a college person coming into the work world. You think that, everybody's going to help you. That's where I was naive. Yeah. But no, they were sort of protective. And I do hope that it's not like that as much anymore. I do hear stories that it is still sort of like that, but companies like yours and other incredible companies that are focused on humanity, I think some of that is falling away.
Well, I also think that we all, gender aside, we all need to remember that every relationship is a two-way street, because you have to be value add, right? We as women, or whether as a woman, as a minority, as a younger person, older person, we should never sit there and expect certain things to be given to us because of our minority status,
Agreed.
Right? Whether that's in gender or age or ethnic background, right? Because if we really don't want to be treated differently as a minority, then we should also step up and do our part. So in my view, and that means that everything has to be a two-way street in value add. So, my boss, one of my mentor champion, who I owe a great deal to, told me from day one is that, Wendy, I don't care if you're a woman, man. I don't care if you are a unicorn or you are like, it doesn't matter. Basically, he's like, I don't care what you are, who you are. As long as you can make this team, my team, look good, you can make my clients happy.
Yeah.
I really don't care anything else. So that was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded cold, but if you think about it, Adrienne, if you break that down, that makes a lot of sense. That actually makes him a fair and a good leader. Does that make sense? That means
100%.
Colorblind, gender blind. He does, right? So then you said, okay, now it comes down to my smarts, my hard work, my resilience, my tenacity. It's on me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Wendy, I feel like you're bringing up something that is really, really interesting, because I do think that we've gone way far to the other side of like, everything is like, oh, you're a woman, or oh, you're a minority. And there is certainly, systemic racism. There's so much, it's like impossible to unwind everything. But I love what you're talking about, because the people also can take a situation and cast it how they want to perceive it, instead of like, look, I don't really care. Like, let's not talk about this. We have a job to do. Let's just do this. I'm not saying this to be harsh because I'm a man and I'm dictating toward you. I'm just saying it like it is. And as a woman, as a minority, sometimes we have to say, like, that person who's saying that just wants to do a good job. And it's hard sometimes to kind of like tease this all apart. And I think it's a level of maturity that also says like, yep, we have a job to do. Like, let's put some things aside for right now. This isn't the time or the place to discuss every single issue that there is in the world. Like, we got work to do.
Yeah, and precisely. And when someone actually takes that perspective, frankly, that's great because it levels the playing field,
Yeah.
right? Then it's all fair game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I again on the topic of two-way street and value add, that's every relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about it, even between kids and the parents, with our significant others, among friends, right?
Yep.
Since I can bet all my net worth that there is
All the
no
money in Piermont
relationship,
Bank.
yeah, no, seriously, but there is no single relationship someone can show me that is sustainable on a one-way street.
No. No. And there's never going to be a relationship where, whether you mean to or not, that you're not going to hurt somebody's feelings for being, insensitive or not taking that other person's point of view into perspective. I mean, we are human beings and we are fallible. And as long as we can sort of recognize, ooh, I didn't mean to say that, or I didn't mean to hurt that person, or I really didn't, I didn't mean it like that. As long as we can all have open communication about all of these things, I think some of these issues can be brought out and laid on the table and talked about. And I think that was something I know that, as I was sort of coming up in the finance world, there really wasn't an opportunity to, bring things to light. It was very, dismissive, and I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I think that there's a lot more openness to having conversations, and I like it. I think it's good, and I think that with all of this stuff that's going on in the world, that there's got to be some positive change that comes out of it. And I do hope, I hope that people listening to this podcast, I hope that they hear you speaking. You are an incredible CEO. I can tell, already that you're somebody that sort of has an open door policy. You're very easy to talk to, and you're also super powerful. So that's something that I feel very inspired by, and I hope that people listening do too. And I do hope that other banks, not to compete, not to compete with you, but I do hope that other financial institutions and other companies that are, maybe more, male oriented, some tech companies, I hope that people see this and they say, I can be the CEO of whatever type of company I want to be a CEO of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of business to be done. There's a lot of companies that needs our support, meaning bank support. So it is so important that we do not just focus on any sort of from a status standpoint, right? Because for us to not to be, if we don't want to be viewed a certain way, then we take the first step,
Yeah.
right? To approach an issue, an environment, a situation, trying to be, age blind, gender blind, and ethnicity blind, right? We take that first step.
Yep.
Now, if after taking that first step, if it's not being reciprocated, then you try to address that, right? So that's really, I think, overall, I think if there's one key takeaway, that's my view. Now, again, some people may view that maybe hey, Wendy, that's a naive way to approach it, but it's certainly better than going into a situation already being negative.
Yeah, I agree with you. And
right?
Hey, I like this message that, sometimes being naive, quote unquote, and I know that you're not naive, but having maybe, I want to say the word correctly. No, I'm not even going to attempt it.
No, but here, choose glass half full versus glass half empty.
That is incredible advice. Right. And go into any situation with that mindset. And I do believe that you are going to come out with a more positive outcome versus going into a situation thinking that glass is half full.
Right, exactly. So I think that attitude, I always say the attitude is more than half the battle, right?
It is.
Because I joke about it, but I also mean that, unless we're putting men on Mars or men on Moon or whatever, what we do every day can be learned, right?
Yep.
With the appropriate amount of training, time, and efforts, right? Hard work, we'll get there. And what differentiates a potential success versus a failure is attitude.
100%. Oh, Wendy, I love that. I think that is an amazing point to end. And I would just love it if you could let the listeners know where they could, reach out and connect with you, maybe get some more advice and just find Piermont Bank.
Sure. So I'm easy to be found via LinkedIn, actually. And I do check that. And I do get back to people. So that probably may be the easiest.
Great. And
it's under my full name. I'm not disguised under anything else.
Okay.
So if you search Wendy Cai-Lee, Piermont Bank, you'll find me.
Great. And people can just go to piermontbank.com in order to sort of explore the bank and the offerings. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I really do hope that more and more banks, more and more other financial institutions, right, whether it's private equity firms, banks, insurance companies, it doesn't matter, that more and more people take the approach of just that, go in there with a more sort of that colorless lens on it.
Yeah. And a glass half full approach too. And I think it also can be a lesson to those companies to also look at some of the women entrepreneurs that come through their door and say, you know what, these people are our future, and let's not put up barriers against them. Let's help them too, because they are the engines of the economy as well. And for far too long, we have been sort of not given some of the tools and resources that we've needed. So I'm loving that you're the CEO. I'm loving Piermont Bank, and I'm loving that I have this platform that I can spread the word about what you're doing. And I know that through this podcast, you're going to inspire a lot of women because you've inspired me.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having a platform like this. And I wish that there was more platforms like yours back in 1995.
Yeah, me too. Wendy, thank you so much. This is wonderful. And have a beautiful day. And I will talk to you soon.
Yes, stay well. Thank you.
Thanks.